may not know this about me, but I take saving the planet very seriously. It's the reason I always eat the grounds after I finish my cup of coffee every morning. Fortunately, President Biden has already signed several executive actions addressing climate concerns, including canceling the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, halting new oil and natural gas leases on public lands and waters, and he's looking to review and reinstate more than 100 environmental measures previously weakened by Trump. But Biden isn't here just to put that thing down, flip it, and reverse it. He's also here to work it.
With this executive order, environmental justice will be at the center of all we do, addressing the disproportionate health and environmental and economic impacts on communities of color.
The Biden administration is also prioritizing environmental justice by nominating people of color to take the lead on the issue for the first time. Brenda Mallory will be the first Black chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Michael S. Regan has been nominated as the first Black man to head the EPA, and Representative Deb Haaland has been nominated to serve as head of the Department of Interior. Not only will she be the first Native American cabinet secretary, she'll also be the first Native American to lead the department that handles Indigenous affairs. These nominations signal a desire in this administration to not only focus on climate change, but to address how environmental issues negatively impact communities of color.
Environmental racism is the intentional targeting of pollution in communities of color. The primary predictor of where toxic waste site will be sited is a community of color, and secondarily, a low-income community.
The environment isn't a person. How can it be racist? But the most basic pieces of the environment, the air we breathe and the water we drink, are controlled and designed by people. And people can be racist.
Of course water can be racist. Just look at Voss's new bottle tops. Why do they have to put his name on it? Nothing shows the effects of environmental racism more clearly than the Flint water crisis. Last month, it was announced that Flint residents would finally get the justice they deserve. Yeah, well, sort of.
Former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder has now been charged with willful neglect of duty for his role in the Flint water crisis. It's amazing.
It's a really big deal. Snyder and a former Flint city official are each facing, if convicted, up to a year in prison or a $1,000 fine if convicted of the misdemeanor charges.
What? $1,000? I've gotten bigger fines for cockfighting. No, it's not what you think, but it is what you imagine. The Flint water crisis began when Michigan officials pulled in improperly treated water for residents from the Flint River, knowing that it had served as a waste disposal site. The water was so corrosive that lead leached out from aging pipes into thousands of homes. Environmental racism is happening everywhere. In 2010, after coal ash spilled into a river in the majority-white city of Kingston, Tennessee, much of that toxic waste was relocated to a landfill in Uniontown, Alabama, where 91% of the population is Black. The reason? Due to some questionable interpretations of EPA regulations, the coal ash was classified hazardous in Kingston, but deemed non-hazardous once it reached Uniontown.
We have a lot of question mark, and we have a lot of our everyday fear because, you know, you're wondering, EPA said it's not hazardous, and you're just wondering, is it hazardous, is it not? But your everyday life is fear. You know, just talking about coal ash, what did you take out of coal ash to not make it hazardous?
Elsewhere in the South, along the Mississippi River in Louisiana, a series of communities are referred to as Cancer Alley. And not just because everyone there is a terrible match for an Aquarius. It's because a dense concentration of petrochemical plants makes some residents more than 50 times as likely to get cancer than the average American.
We're in what's known as Cancer Alley in Louisiana, an area between New Orleans and Baton Rouge lined with petrochemical plants and refineries. Most of the towns here are poor and Black with extremely high rates of sickness and suffering.
For once, why can't people live next to a fun factory like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory? The runoff from that place is only melted chocolate and the blood of a German child. The effects of climate change and environmental racism are especially harmful for Indigenous communities.
The Dakota Access Pipeline begins in North Dakota's Bakken oil field. The pipeline's original path crossed the Missouri River just north of Bismarck, a city that is 90% white. But when concerns were raised about a potential oil spill there, the pipeline was rerouted south to go under the river right next to the Standing Rock Reservation.
They didn't want it in Bismarck, but it was, it's okay if the Indians, you can go down and run it through the reservation where all those Indians live. Who cares about the Indians?
Even though it poses a huge risk to the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe's water supply, the Dakota Access Pipeline is still fully operational today. Indigenous leaders are urging Biden to cancel the pipeline, just like he did for Keystone XL. We like to think of climate change as a global issue that impacts everyone the same way. But often, communities of color are the ones who are hurt the most, both by man-made climate change and the natural disasters that follow it. After a natural disaster, the federal government spends billions of dollars annually on helping communities rebuild. But white and wealthy Americans often receive more federal dollars after a disaster than minorities and those with less wealth. Basically, in the past, if a blizzard devastated a Black community, FEMA would help the snow before it helped the community. Black and Indigenous people have been at the forefront of environmental activism for decades, and they've repeatedly been marginalized. It's great that the Biden administration is finally listening, because if we want environmental justice, we have to protect everyone. Aw, thanks for watching. If you'd like to hear more from Full Frontal, hit subscribe and visit our page for more videos. Or if you'd like to be radicalized, leave YouTube on autoplay.